This is a short introduction to multidimensional lists in Python. As we've seen with the single-dimensional lists, you can store data in memory in Python, and a list is simply a data structure that allows you to do that. Like single-dimensional lists, multidimensional lists hold a series of data with an index and then some data. So that's basically the same. What a multidimensional list is, it's a list inside of a list. So what it generates is a matrix. And if you're familiar with Microsoft Excel, you've seen a matrix. It is a series of rows and a series of columns, and each cell represents an individual data point. So let's take a quick look on how to set up, in this case it will be a 5 by 5 matrix. Now here I have on line 4 n equal 5. That's just the number I'm going to count to. Here I have a variable called myMultiList, and myMultiList is equal to, and right now, a single dimensional list. And just for the fun of it, when you see the printout, you'll see myMultiList, and it will be just like the MyList in the single dimensional list video, because there won't be anything in it. Now I'm also going to create a helper variable. Oh, let me see. Actually, I don't need that, so ignore that. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to populate my multidimensional list. And you will notice that I start with a for loop, and I have a utility variable called row counter. I'm going to use the in keyword because I'm using the range function, and I'm going from 0 to n minus 1 because range is not inclusive of n. And in here I'm going to create another utility variable. And this utility variable is used inside the scope of this for loop. So, and I could have created it outside, but what I want to do is every time I come up to the top of this for loop, I want the variable row to be recreated with an empty list. So this is in fact what happens here. Now, as you'll notice, I've done another for loop. In our previous section, when we just did single dimensional lists, there was only one loop. So here there's a second loop. This second loop is for the columns. Okay, so each row is going to have some number of columns, and each column is going to contain, the intersection between a row and a column is a cell, and each cell will contain a piece of data. So in this case, I'm using a for loop. I'm going to use the in keyword because I'm using the range function. I'm going to go from 0 to n again. And in here, I'm going to append my row. And what I'm going to add to my row is column and then the number of the column. And this will be actually in the cell. This is what will be put in the cell. And then when I'm all done with the functionality for this for loop, I am going to append row to my multi-list. And then when I'm all done, I'm going to print this out. Now I'm going to print it out a little differently than just saying print my list because it's kind of difficult to read. It doesn't come out really well showing you that it's a matrix. So let's run this really quick and we can see what we've got. We have row 0 contains column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. So here is our matrix. Okay? We have rows and columns, and that is always how you work through a multidimensional list. You go to the row first, and then you go to the individual column for that row, you will get to a cell, and that cell will contain a piece of data. For instance, row 0 of column 2 contains the word column 2. So let's see how to access that. And actually, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do that. I'm going to say print print my multi-list. Row is always first. Then you're going to tell it which cell you want or which column you want. So I'm going to say column 2. And when I run this, I get column 2, and lo and behold, I get column 2 here. So let's make this a little different so it looks a little visually different when we look at it again. So instead of column %D, I'm going to say, now what I'm going to say is row %D, so it tells you the accessor. Oops, ignore that syntax. So here what I'm going to do is show you each of the accessors. So instead of having a single accessor, I'm going to have 2 accessors. I'm going to have the row, which is the row counter, and the cell and the column, which is the column counter. And that intersection gives me a cell. So here you'll see I have cell at 00, 01, 02, 03. Row 1, you'll see that I have a cell at 10, 11, 12, and 13, and so on. So in row 2, I have a row 2, column 0, row 2, column 1. And here I wanted to see cell at 0, 2. So that's how you get to the data in the cell, is you go row-wise, column-wise. It's always row-wise, then column-wise. So this has been a short introduction to how to populate and view data in a multidimensional list.